There are awakenings that feel like revelations, and there are awakenings that feel like earthquakes. Most people imagine awakening as light, as serenity, as a gentle expansion of the mind toward higher truths. But Nietzsche, this wanderer of storms, this cartographer of the soul's abysses, whispered a darker, more uncomfortable truth: awakening destroys before it illuminates. He believed that the moment a human being truly awakens, the world they once inhabited begins to crack, not because reality changes, but because they finally dare to see it without the veils that once protected them. The collapse is not external, it is internal. It is the fracture of illusions that were mistaken for foundations. It is the breaking of chains that the spirit did not even know it carried. It is the end of every borrowed certainty that once gave comfort. Nietzsche understood that the greatest fear of humanity is not the unknown, it is clarity. To awaken is to strip the world of its disguises, to remove the anesthesia of habit, to confront life not as we wish it were, but as it is, raw, restless, unpromised. A truth that burns. A truth that does not wait for permission to reveal itself. For Nietzsche, awakening is a catastrophe. Not a destruction of life, but of the false architectures erected upon it. Dogmas, moralities, consolations, simplistic narratives, second-hand meanings. He believed that almost everyone sleeps precisely because the world built on illusion feels safer than the world uncovered by lucidity. When a person awakens, they do not merely open their eyes, their inner world trembles. Their beliefs crack like old glass. Their values begin to wobble. Their identity, once so stable, becomes fluid, molten, frighteningly alive. The map they once used to navigate existence dissolves. Their inner compass no longer points to familiar destinations. This is why Nietzsche said that the first step toward awakening is chaos. A chaos that does not come from the universe, but from within the soul. He believed that every human being carries within them a fragile architecture of borrowed truths, truths inherited from parents, teachers, traditions, religions, nations, cultures. We do not build the foundation of our lives. We receive it. We do not choose our moralities. We inherit them. We do not create our gods. We accept them. And then, one day, for some, something cracks. A question. A tragedy. A silence. A moment of brutal honesty. A confrontation with mortality. A look into the mirror that lingers too long. A thought that refuses to go away. Nietzsche called this moment the first tremor. The tremor that reveals how fragile our inner world actually is. The tremor that announces a deeper truth, that the foundations we trusted were not solid, they were simply comfortable. The moment this tremor occurs, the old world begins to collapse. Not the physical world, but the symbolic one. The world of illusions that allowed us to avoid the weight of existence. Nietzsche believed that humanity created entire civilizations to escape awakening. We built temples not to find God, but to hide from freedom. We built moralities not to elevate ourselves, but to tame ourselves. We created heavenly promises not to understand life, but to soften it. For Nietzsche, the world most people inhabit is not reality, it is a refuge. A beautifully constructed dream. A shared sleep. A collective anesthesia. To awaken from this dream is to feel the earth tremble beneath your feet. It is to walk through the ruins of your own beliefs. It is to realize, with a mixture of terror and liberation, that perhaps everything you thought you knew was only a story told to keep you calm. And it is here, precisely here, where Nietzsche's forgotten prophecy begins. Because he warned us, more than a century ago, that the moment humanity truly awakens, the world as we know it will collapse. Not civilization. Not society. But the inner world of inherited meanings. He foresaw a future where the old gods would lose their power, where morality would crumble, where collective truths would fracture into dust. A time when humanity would be forced to confront something it has avoided for centuries. The void. The void not as emptiness, but as unfiltered reality. The void as the place where all illusions die. The void as the birthplace of authentic existence. Nietzsche believed that the greatest mistake humanity ever made was mistaking the void for a threat. For him, The void is not the enemy, it is the beginning. The void is the open field where new meaning can be cultivated. It is the fire that purifies. It is the silence where the true voice of the soul can finally speak. But to reach this void, to truly look into it, one must let the old world collapse. One must walk through the ruins without trying to rebuild them too quickly. One must resist the temptation to cling to the familiar. Awakening, for Nietzsche, is a long descent into truth. A dismantling of illusions, layer by painful layer. A pilgrimage to the depths of the self, a place few dare to enter because it demands courage without guarantees. He believed that every human being who awakens must pass through 3 phases. 1. The collapse, where the old world dies. 2. The descent, where the void opens. 3. The creation, where a new world is born within. Humanity, he said, is trapped between the first and the second. We feel the collapse but fear the descent. We want meaning but cling to illusion. We desire awakening but hold tightly to sleep. The world collapses when you awaken, yes, but Nietzsche insisted that this collapse is necessary. He saw it as the price of becoming authentic. The price of becoming free. The price of becoming alive. Because you cannot create a new world while standing inside the architecture of the old. You cannot awaken while still protecting the dreams that keep you asleep. You cannot grow while clinging to what has already died. Nietzsche believed that every awakening begins with destruction. But he also believed, and this is the forgotten prophecy, that from this destruction, a new kind of humanity will rise. A humanity that does not fear the void. A humanity that uses the void as a canvas. A humanity that creates meaning instead of inheriting it. A humanity that understands that life is not something to endure, it is something to sculpt. He believed that the awakened human being, the one who walks through the collapse and survives the descent, becomes something extraordinary. A creator of worlds. Not a passive recipient of meaning, but an active inventor of it. Not a follower of truth, but a builder of it. Not a seeker of salvation, but the architect of their own becoming. For Nietzsche, awakening is the beginning of self-creation. And this is why the world collapses when you awaken, because the self that will emerge cannot stand upon the borrowed foundations of the past. It must build its own. And so, the collapse is not a tragedy. It is a birth. A violent, beautiful, painful, necessary birth. Nietzsche believed that humanity's greatest fear is not suffering, it is transformation. But he also believed that transformation is the highest calling of the human spirit. To awaken is to transform. To transform is to become. And to become is to honor the deepest potential of existence. This is the world that collapses when you awaken. The world of illusion. The world of inherited truths. The world of unquestioned morality. The world of spiritual laziness. The world of unexamined faith. The world of safety disguised as meaning. And this collapse, this sacred destruction, is the first step toward the prophecy Nietzsche left behind. That one day humanity will awaken not to a God outside, but to the divine fire within. And that fire will be strong enough to build a new world from the ashes of the old, a world created not out of fear, but out of courage. There is a moment in every awakening when the ground beneath the soul begins to tremble. A moment when the lights that once guided us seem to flicker, as if the universe itself were exhaling everything we once believed to be true. Nietzsche described this moment not as tragedy, but as necessity, the inevitable collapse that precedes authenticity. Most people imagine awakening as illumination, but illumination only comes after the darkness. Before clarity, there is confusion. Before strength, there is fracture. Before rebirth, there is death. Nietzsche called this period the night of the spirit, the night in which the soul must walk without the crutches of inherited truths. Because when awakening begins, the illusions fall. Not gently, not quietly, but like towers collapsing under the weight of their own contradictions. And as these illusions fall, the first thing we encounter is fear. Fear of emptiness. Fear of meaninglessness. fear of freedom, fear of standing alone in a universe without guarantees. Nietzsche insisted that this fear is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of transition. It is the trembling of the soul as it steps out of the cage it once mistook for home. The collapse of the first illusion, the illusion of certainty. Humanity has always worshipped certainty. We fear the unknown so deeply that we create entire belief systems to protect ourselves from it. We invent moral codes, metaphysical theories, political ideologies, scientific doctrines, anything that can give us the impression that life is predictable, stable, understandable. But Nietzsche saw through this need for certainty. He believed that certainty is the most subtle form of slavery, a psychological sedative, a spiritual tranquilizer. We cling to certainty not because it is true, but because it is comforting. But when awakening begins, certainty is the first to crumble. Suddenly, the truths you inherited no longer feel solid. The values you assumed to be eternal reveal their human fingerprints. The beliefs you carried for decades begin to shake under the slightest pressure. The world feels less like a map and more like a vast, shapeless landscape, beautiful but uncompromising. And you realize, perhaps for the first time, that certainty was never real. It was a warm blanket woven out of collective agreement. Nietzsche believed that awakening requires the courage to live without guarantees. To walk through life not as a believer, but as a creator. Not as a follower of truths, but as the one who births them. The collapse of the second illusion, the illusion of the herd. For Nietzsche, one of the greatest obstacles to awakening is the instinct of the herd, the unconscious pressure to conform. Human beings fear standing alone more than they fear being wrong. So they adopt the beliefs of the group, the morality of the group, the dreams of the group. They trade the danger of authenticity for the safety of belonging. Nietzsche warned that the herd does not lead to truth, it leads to paralysis. The herd sleeps, dreams, obeys, repeats. It does not create. It does not question. It does not transform. When a person awakens, the herd instinct begins to dissolve. You no longer feel compelled to fit in. You no longer sacrifice your soul to maintain social approval. You begin to see that most of what society calls good is simply what is convenient for the herd. But Nietzsche insisted. Awakening requires the courage to stand alone, a spiritual solitude that terrifies the unprepared. This solitude is not loneliness. It is independence. It is the liberation from collective hypnosis. It is the first breath of authenticity. The collapse of the third illusion, the illusion of moral comfort. Perhaps nothing collapses more violently during awakening than morality. Not morality as ethics, but morality as a system of control. The morality that tells you what to think, how to act, what to desire, what to fear. The morality that pretends to be divine but was created by men seeking order, obedience, predictability. Nietzsche saw morality as humanity's great mistake, not because morality is unnecessary, but because morality is rarely examined. People obey without asking. They conform without understanding. They follow rules that were imposed centuries before they were born. Awakening tears this structure apart. Suddenly you realize that good and evil are not cosmic truths, they are historical constructions. You see how guilt has been used as a tool of manipulation. You notice how fear masquerades as virtue. You recognize that society praises obedience more than honesty. This collapse is painful, because morality is one of the strongest anchors of human identity. But Nietzsche believed that true awakening requires the courage to rebuild morality from within, not through obedience, but through authenticity. The collapse of the fourth illusion, the illusion of a predetermined life. Perhaps the deepest illusion of all is the belief that life has a predetermined path. That destiny is written by someone or something outside of us. That existence has a fixed meaning that we must discover. That our lives are chapters in a cosmic novel already written. Nietzsche shattered this illusion with brutal clarity. Life has no predetermined meaning. Meaning is something you create, or it does not exist. For the sleeping soul, This truth feels terrifying. For the awakening soul, it feels liberating. It means you are not a character in someone else's story, you are the author. It means fate is not imposed, it is sculpted. It means you are responsible for your life in a way that is both empowering and frightening. The pain of the collapse. When all these illusions fall, the first sensation is not liberation, it is vertigo. The mind spins. The soul trembles. The heart panics. There is an overwhelming sense that the ground is gone. And Nietzsche insisted that this moment, this terrifying dissolution, is sacred. Because it is here, in this chaos, where the real work begins. It is here where the spirit becomes malleable again. It is here where the false self dies and the true self begins to emerge. The night before the dawn. Nietzsche often compared awakening to the rhythm of the day. Darkness before light, crisis before clarity, collapse before creation. The night of the spirit is the moment when the soul wanders without identity, without certainty, without protection. It is a sacred night, the night that burns away everything that is not real. But Nietzsche believed in something profound. The night is not the end, it is preparation. The night prepares the soul for the dawn. The collapse prepares the being for creation. The void prepares the spirit for transformation. This night, this collapse of illusions, is the space where the soul must learn to stand naked before reality. Not asking for guarantees. Not demanding meaning. But allowing itself to feel existence in its pure, unfiltered form. And in this nakedness, Nietzsche said, the soul discovers the first spark of freedom. The first flicker of the new dawn. After the collapse, something subtle begins to happen. A quiet clarity. A silent courage. A fragile but unmistakable sense of internal expansion. This is the moment Nietzsche cherished, the birth of authenticity. You begin to sense that the world is no longer something to interpret, but something to sculpt. That meaning is no longer inherited, but created. That identity is no longer fixed, but fluid. That you are not a spectator of life, but a participant in its creation. This dawn is not loud. It does not come with fanfare or triumph. It arrives softly, like a whisper from within. The whisper of becoming. The forgotten prophecy emerges. Here, in the residue of collapse, Nietzsche's forgotten prophecy reveals itself. Humanity will rise again, not through belief, but through creation. Not through obedience, but through self-overcoming. Not through the return of old gods, but through the birth of new selves. This prophecy is not about the end of the world, but about the end of illusion, and the beginning of authenticity. There is a moment in every awakening when the soul must take a step that no one else can take for it. A moment when the old world has already collapsed, but the new world has not yet begun. A moment suspended between destruction and creation, between fear and possibility. Nietzsche called this moment the descent into the void. Not the void of despair, but the void of truth. Not the void that destroys, the void that reveals. For Nietzsche, the void was not emptiness, it was the birthplace of all transformation. He believed that to awaken fully, a human being must pass through the most frightening territory of existence. The territory where nothing is guaranteed, nothing is fixed, nothing is external, nothing is predetermined. This is the place where all masks fall, where all illusions evaporate, where all certainties dissolve, where the self must meet itself, stripped of every lie. The void as the mirror of being. Most people spend their lives avoiding the void. They fill their days with noise, distraction, rituals, entertainment, dogmas, relationships, ambitions, anything that can prevent them from facing the raw silence within. Because silence terrifies. Stillness terrifies. The absence of meaning terrifies. But Nietzsche insisted that this terror is precisely why the void is sacred. The void is the mirror that reflects the truth of who you are when nothing external remains. It shows you your deepest fears, your hidden desires, your unhealed wounds, your untapped strength. And it whispers a terrible revelation. Everything you believed you needed was only a substitute for courage. The void removes all substitutes. It removes all comforts. It removes all illusions. You stand alone, not because the world abandoned you, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself. Why the void frightens us. The void is frightening not because it is empty, but because it reveals our freedom. Human beings fear freedom far more than they fear chains. Freedom demands responsibility. Freedom demands creation. Freedom demands the courage to shape life instead of merely enduring it. In the void, Nietzsche said, the human being faces the truth that there is no final authority, no divine script, no cosmic map, no predetermined destiny. There is only this moment, this breath, this consciousness, this possibility. And possibility is terrifying because it demands action. This is why most people prefer the comfort of inherited beliefs to the risk of authentic living. They prefer certainty to truth. They prefer obedience to freedom. But Nietzsche believed that the void breaks the spell. It forces the soul to confront the truth that nothing outside you can save you. Nothing outside you can define you. Nothing outside you can complete you. This is not despair. It is liberation. The void as the furnace of transformation. Nietzsche often spoke of the need for the human being to undergo a kind of inner combustion, a burning away of everything false, a purification through suffering, honesty, and solitude. The void is that furnace. Inside the void, every lie you told yourself burns. Every mask you wore melts. Every false value disintegrates. You face your shadow, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. You face your fear, not as punishment, but as initiation. You face your emptiness, not as tragedy, but as possibility. Nietzsche believed that only those who are willing to walk through this fire can be reborn as creators. Because creation does not arise from comfort, it arises from rupture. The void is the rupture. The point where the old self dies and the new self begins. The three voices of the void. Nietzsche believed that the void speaks in three distinct voices, three forces that guide the soul through its descent. 1. The voice of silence. The first voice is silence, a silence so profound it feels alive. This silence does not offer answers. It does not console. It does not explain. It simply mirrors your inner condition. When you enter the void, silence becomes the background of everything. Thoughts echo differently. Feelings rise without distraction. Identity becomes transparent. This silence asks nothing, but reveals everything. Nietzsche believed that most people are terrified of silence because it exposes them to themselves. The silence of the void is not emptiness, it is truth without decoration. 2. The voice of fear. The second voice is fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of meaninglessness. Fear of dissolving. Fear of becoming someone new. Fear is the guardian of the threshold, the final test before transformation. Nietzsche considered fear to be a sign that one is close to truth. Because only false truths comfort, real truths shake the soul. Fear arises in the void because the soul senses that it cannot return to its old state. The descent has already begun. Fear is not a barrier, it is a passage. 3. The voice of creation. The third voice is subtle, fragile, almost imperceptible. It is the voice of creation. This voice does not shout, it whispers. It whispers new possibilities, new values, new meanings. It whispers the first words of a new language, the language of becoming. This is the most sacred voice of the void. The whisper that says you are capable of more than you ever believed. The sacred loneliness of the descent. Nietzsche believed that the descent into the void is a solitary journey. Not because others cannot love you, but because no one else can carry your consciousness. Awakening is not a collective event, it is an individual initiation. There are moments in the descent where you will feel completely alone. Moments where the universe feels indifferent. Moments where meaning feels distant. But Nietzsche insisted that this solitude is not abandonment, it is purification. It is the solitude that gives birth to strength. It is the solitude that exposes the truth. It is the solitude that reveals your inner flame. You walk alone not because no one walks with you, but because no one can walk for you. The discovery at the bottom of the void. When the soul reaches the bottom of the void, the deepest silence, the fiercest fear, the total solitude, something unexpected appears. Not despair. Not nothingness. But a new beginning. Nietzsche believed that the bottom of the void is the birthplace of authentic selfhood. A self that is no longer defined by society, morality, tradition, or fear. A self that is free not because it has no chains, but because it has burned them. A self that does not seek meaning. It creates meaning. At the bottom of the void, the soul discovers there is no final truth, except the one you are strong enough to create. This realization is terrifying and liberating. The first ascent begins. Once this realization takes root, something begins to awaken within you. A strength, a fire, a clarity. This is the moment Nietzsche cherished, the moment when the soul begins its ascent. The void does not swallow the awakened, it gives them wings. You rise not because someone rescues you, but because you discover the force that was always within you. You rise not because meaning is given to you, but because you begin to sculpt it. You rise not because the world changes, but because your consciousness does. The ascent is not the end of the void, it is the integration of it. The return with new eyes. When you return from the void, the world is the same, but you are not. You look at life differently. You feel differently. You understand differently. What once frightened you now fascinates you. What once controlled you now dissolves. What once defined you now becomes raw material for creation. This is the beginning of Nietzsche's highest ideal, the transformation of the human being into a creator. There comes a moment after the descent into the void when the soul feels an unfamiliar trembling within itself. A stirring, a faint pulse, a quiet ignition. It is the moment Nietzsche considered the rarest and most sacred in the human journey. The birth of the creator. Until now, the human being has lived under inherited structures, values borrowed, meanings inherited, beliefs absorbed unconsciously. Even rebellion was often imitation in disguise. Even freedom was frequently dependence on a different master. But after the void, after the collapse of illusions, after the confrontation with pure nothingness, the soul awakens to a realization as frightening as it is empowering. No one is coming to give you meaning. You are the sculptor of your own existence. This is where the new human begins. This is where the creator is born. The creator emerges from ruins. Nietzsche believed that creation does not happen in peaceful gardens or tranquil temples. Creation begins in ruins. Only when the false self has burned away can the authentic self begin to speak. Only when the old values collapse can new values take shape. Only when one has passed through the fire of inner death can one experience inner rebirth. The creator rises from ashes, not as a survivor, but as an architect. He does not cling to the ruins, he builds upon them. He does not lament the collapse, he uses it as raw material. He does not seek to restore what was lost, he dares to imagine what has never been. This is the power Nietzsche spoke of, not dominance over others, but mastery of oneself. The new responsibility, creation as destiny. For Nietzsche, the greatest weight a human being could carry was not suffering, but responsibility. The responsibility of being the author of one's life. The responsibility of giving form to chaos. The responsibility of choosing what one will become. This responsibility terrifies those who still seek external authority. But for the Creator, responsibility is liberation. Because he understands that without responsibility, there is no authenticity. Without responsibility, there is no freedom. Without responsibility, there is no self. The Creator does not ask, "What should I do?" He asks, "What can I create?" He does not ask, "What is the right path?" He asks, "What path will I build?" He does not ask, "Who must I be?" He asks, "Who can I become?" the sacred act of valuation. Nietzsche believed that the creator is not merely an artist, he is a legislator of values. Values are not eternal laws carved in cosmic stone. They are creations of consciousness. They are interpretations solidified over centuries. They are the shadows of human desires, fears, and limitations. The creator does not inherit values, he evaluates them. He does not obey values, he transforms them. He does not accept values, he creates them. This act of valuation is sacred. It is the moment when the human being becomes more than a product of history. He becomes a participant in the creation of history. Creation requires solitude. Nietzsche insisted that all true creation demands solitude. Not the solitude of isolation, but the solitude of selfhood. When the creator stands before his inner fire, the noise of the world fades. The opinions of others lose their power. The expectations of society become irrelevant. Because creation requires a silence where intuition can speak. A silence where consciousness can hear itself. A silence where the self can finally create without interference. This solitude is not a prison, it is a sanctuary. It is where the creator forges his language, his vision, his form. It is where new worlds are conceived. The creator and the abyss. The creator does not flee the abyss he once descended into. He carries it within him. Nietzsche believed that the abyss becomes an ally once the soul has survived it. It becomes the source of depth, the source of authenticity, the source of power. The creator stands at the edge of the abyss, not with fear, but with understanding. He knows that creation emerges from chaos. That clarity emerges from shadow. That strength emerges from wounds. The abyss becomes his reservoir of meaning. He drinks from it without becoming consumed. The dance with chaos. Creation is not order imposed upon the world. Creation is a dance with chaos. Nietzsche believed that the creator is the one who can take chaos and give it rhythm. Not suppress it, not fear it, not deny it, but dance with it. Chaos is not the enemy of creation, it is its raw material. The creator knows that life refuses to be tamed. That existence moves in spirals, contradictions, eruptions, dissolutions. That the universe itself is a symphony of disorder becoming form. To create is to join that cosmic dance. To resonate with the rhythms of becoming. To transform the unpredictable into the meaningful.